Thousands enjoy running a new Streetathon route, but unhappy about long wait to collect bags. Latest peace plan aims to end the killings, but Ukraine and allies want to make changes to the plan. Airlines are avoiding Venezuela after U.S. warning. Hello, you're watching the 7:30 News. I'm Melissa Hekalea. About 20,000 runners took part in the Hong Kong Streetathon on Sunday. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the event, which has a new route. Mimo Singhai reports.
Let's go! Marathon at 5:15 a.m. on a Sunday morning. These runners kicked off the Streetathon at Eastern Harbour Crossing with Deputy Chief Secretary Chek Wing-hing being the guest of honour at the opening ceremony. They then passed the Central Pier before heading back to the Eastern Harbour Crossing and towards the Kwun Tong Promenade. A new route that was added to the race was the Central Kowloon Bypass in Yau Ma Tei, which will be open to traffic in December. Apart from marathon athletes, those who joined the half marathon also obtained a first-hand experience running on the newly built road. But this new route came with some challenges. This man said the Central Kowloon Bypass was probably the most difficult tunnel he had ever run because of its slopes.
I think because the half marathon finished before the full marathon, I think I was the first one to ever run through that tunnel, so that's pretty cool.
Congratulations! Yeah! Secretary for Transport and Logistics Mabel Chan was among the people who tested out the new road by running for 2 kilometers. Chan hoped residents can be encouraged to take part in exercises through infrastructure. She expressed the government's wish to collaborate with Streetathon again next year. While 10-kilometer athletes could not run on a trunk road, many of them engaged in another type of novelty, dressing up. Can you spot the blue robot cat, Doraemon? Not everyone cosplayed as fictional or cartoon characters. Here is a movable ballot box. Moons 9, TVB News.
Many half and full marathon runners complained about the baggage collection at Streetathon. This video shows people were queuing to collect their belongings at the Central Kowloon Bypass. All the bags were placed on the ground with number labels on them. A similar scene was found at Kwun Tong Promenade, the finishing point for 10-kilometer runners. Streetathon's organizer apologized for the inconvenience, saying that the problems were caused by broken-down technology. They said a scanner was used to identify people's belongings and their corresponding baggage zones, but the system failed to do so. Ukraine's Western allies rallied around the country as they pushed to revise a U.S. peace plan seen as favoring Moscow. A Ukrainian delegation, bolstered by representatives from France, Germany, and the UK, is preparing for direct talks with Washington in Switzerland. Nazvi Karim with more.
Family and friends mourn at the funeral of a Ukrainian soldier who died on the battlefield earlier this month. 41-year-old machine gunner Ruslan Zhuhunov was killed in Kramatorsk in the Donbass, one of 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers who have died over the past month, according to U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump's latest peace plan, cautiously accepted by Moscow, seeks to end the killing by urging Ukraine to concede territory to Russia, something Kyiv has consistently refused to do. Trump's 28-point plan, without Ukrainian and European input, largely favors Russia. European allies at the Group of 20 summit in South Africa said they plan to take it up with U.S. officials in Geneva this week.
It is important to keep firmly in mind what we're all trying to achieve, which is a just and lasting peace, but also underpinning that is the principle that I've always adhered to, that all matters about Ukraine must be determined in the end by Ukraine, and that's why we're talking very regularly with the Ukrainians.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said peace can only be achieved with the unconditional consent of Ukraine and Europe because it is a war on the European continent.
Ukraine, the US, and the Europeans want peace, but we want a robust and long-standing peace. But at the same time, as what is at stake is obviously Ukrainian sovereignty, and European security, it's normal to have both the Ukrainians and the Europeans on the table to finalize this plan. So this is exactly what we will do tomorrow and the day after in order to make a common plan.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he has appointed a delegation to discuss with Washington the U.S. plan. In Kyiv, some Ukrainians marked the great famine that Soviet leader Joseph Stalin imposed in the early 1930s, leading to millions of deaths. This is a tragic day, said Olesya Stasiuk of the National Association of Researchers of the Holodomor genocide of Ukrainians. Once again, we feel we're on the brink. Either the Ukrainian people will exist or they will not. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Brazil's COP30 presidency has pushed through a compromise climate deal that would boost finance for poor nations coping with global warming, but omitted any mention of the fossil fuels driving it. In securing the accord, Brazil hopes to demonstrate global unity in addressing climate change impacts, even after the world's biggest historic emitter, the United States, declined to send an official delegation. Tracy Furness has more.
The United Nations climate talks in Brazil reached a subdued agreement Saturday that pledged more funding to countries to adapt to the wrath of extreme weather. But the catch-all agreement doesn't include explicit details to phase out fossil fuels or strengthen countries' inadequate emissions-cutting plans, which dozens of nations demanded.
Nations said they would triple the amount of money promised to help the most vulnerable countries adapt to climate change. But they would take 5 more years to do it. And the final document didn't explicitly say how to get away from fossil fuels.
I would have preferred that the transition away from fossil fuels had been in the document, but key countries objected to that. The way this works is a process of unanimity. Everybody has to agree. But what's also significant today is that there's enough in this agreement for Brazil to launch that key roadmap on the transition away from fossil fuels, which the COP president announced. These are difficult, strenuous, tiring, frustrating negotiations.
The UN's climate chief, Simon Steele, said the new agreement reached would help keep humanity in the fight for a livable planet. He added there was a firm resolve to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius target by the end of this century, agreed to in the Paris Agreement of 2015. Steele also focused on the achievements of the 194 countries in attendance, as opposed to the United States, which chose not to attend.
Here in Belém, nations chose unity, science, and economic common sense. This year, there's been a lot of attention on one country stepping back. But amid the gale-force political headwinds, 194 countries stood firm in solidarity, rock solid in the support of climate cooperation. 194 countries, representing billions of people, have said in one voice that the Paris Agreement is working and resolved to make it go further and faster.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The United States is poised to launch a new phase of Venezuela-related operations in the coming days, Reuters reports, citing U.S. officials. The Trump administration is increasing pressure on President Nicolas Maduro's government, which the U.S. blames for the supply of illegal drugs that have killed Americans. Maduro says the U.S. is looking for pretexts for war and is after Venezuela's oil fields. Nazvi Karim with details.
On Friday, thousands of students from across the country responded to a call by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to attend a peace march in the capital, Caracas. He told them he wanted to connect student movements between Venezuela and the U.S. with the message of no to war and that Venezuela wants peace. This amid mixed signals from U.S. President Donald Trump, who said he was willing to talk to Maduro but also refused to rule out military action and even overthrowing his government. The U.S. Navy's largest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, arrived in the Caribbean on November 16th with its strike group, joining at least 7 other warships, a nuclear submarine and F-35 aircraft. U.S. forces in the region so far have focused on anti-narcotics operations, carrying out at least 21 strikes on alleged drug boats, killing at least 83 people. Human rights groups have condemned the attacks as extrajudicial and contravening international law. Two U.S. officials told Reuters that covert operations would likely be the first part of the new action against Maduro. A senior administration official on Saturday said Trump is prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into the country. Maduro denies U.S. accusations that he is leading the Cartel de los Soles drug syndicate, which Washington plans to designate a foreign terrorist group. The U.S. reportedly warned major airlines about a potentially hazardous situation in the region. Reports say 6 international airlines from Spain, Portugal, Chile, Colombia, Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago have suspended flights to Venezuela. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Still ahead, Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China will not let Japan turn back the wheel of history. At least 24 Gazan deaths in the latest Israeli airstrikes. Welcome back. Amid heightened tensions between China and Japan, Premier Li Qiang and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi reportedly did not interact with each other at the G20 summit venue in South Africa. Danny Zhou has the story.
Prior to the commencement of the G20 summit, Premier Li Qiang shook hands with multiple leaders upon entering the venue. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi arrived after proceedings had begun. 3 heads of state stood between Li and Takaichi when posing for a group photo, and no exchange was observed between the two before they departed separately. Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who has just wrapped up his tour in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, said in a media interview that it was shocking for Japan's leader to openly send such wrongful signal regarding Taiwan, and stressed Beijing won't allow the resurgence of Japanese militarism. Wang, so far the most senior Chinese official to comment publicly on the issue, stressed China will never permit right-wing forces in Japan to turn back the wheel of history, nor will it tolerate external forces to lay hands on the Taiwan region. Meanwhile, Qi Xing, publisher of The Observer from Taiwan, said in an interview that Takaichi's remarks had indeed crossed the line and infringed on China's core interests. She brought up Japan's occupation and colonial rule of the island that lasted for half a century and stated it bears a grave historical responsibility of the Taiwan question. Takaichi has not made any apologies yet, she said, as she urged people to stand together with the nation and view the issue correctly. The ensuing spat has already spread to tourism. A number of Chinese cruise operators have altered routes to bypass Japanese ports and head to South Korea instead. A Reuters report says one Chinese cruise ship operating the Japan-Korea route has adjusted its December itinerary, avoiding scheduled stops at Japanese ports, including Fukuoka and Nagasaki, in favor of sailing directly to Jeju. Multiple Chinese airlines have reduced flights to Japan. China's Civil Aviation Network indicated that at least 9 carriers, including China Eastern Airlines, Junyao Airlines and Spring Airlines, have cut over 70 weekly flights to Japan. Japanese Defense Chief Shinjiro Koizumi inspected self-defense forces facilities on Miyako and Ishigaki Islands, marking his first visit to Okinawa Prefecture since taking office. It is reported that Koizumi met with local officials and sought understanding for the strengthening of defenses of the southwestern islands, in light of the intensifying security challenges around Japan. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Health officials in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 24 people and wounded another 54, including children across the territory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office say the strikes targeted Hamas militants and killed 5 members of the group. Tracy Furness has more.
Fire blazing in a building in Gaza City after an Israeli airstrike. Fire trucks arrive at the scene as firefighters climb the building to extinguish the flames. This is just one of the airstrikes across Gaza Saturday that killed 24 people and injured 54, the latest test of the ceasefire which began on October 10th. This man, displaced from Khan Yunis, said, "A truce means a complete ceasefire, they on one side and we on the other. Then they negotiate the stages we want, but it can't be like this, with them attacking and us attacking. That's unacceptable. This isn't life, we can't live like this, and neither can they. Therefore, everyone must abide by it." One of Saturday's strikes targeted a vehicle that killed 11 Palestinians and wounded 20 in the Ramal neighborhood of Gaza City. The strikes came as international momentum was building in Gaza, with the UN Security Council on Monday approving the US blueprint to secure and govern the territory. It authorizes an international stabilization force to provide security, approves a transitional authority to be overseen by President Donald Trump, and envisions a possible future path to an independent Palestinian state. Israel has previously carried out similar waves of strikes after reported attacks on its forces during the ceasefire. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
A group of medical personnel from the Hong Kong Red Cross shared their frontline relief experiences in the Gaza Strip. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Amid the terror of constant airstrikes and daily assaults on the Gaza Strip, a group of medical personnel from the Hong Kong Red Cross braved the risks of shelling and gunfire to provide much-needed assistance to the Palestinian people. Based in a makeshift hospital in Rafah, the team consists of volunteers and medical professionals who have served in disaster sites and war zones across Haiti, Bangladesh, and Ethiopia. Many of them shared the shock of the brutality they witnessed in the Gaza Strip, recalling an almost never-ending stream of mutilated patients and having to comfort a father who lost 6 sons in a single airstrike. Carmen Kwok, a nurse specializing in palliative care, said one of her most unforgettable experiences in Rafah was caring for a mother who suffered extensive burn injuries.
I took care of a lady, and the lady is just finished it's really a big surgery because she got air strike and then the abdomen burns out, okay? They put a lot of tubes inside and it's severe injury. And after that, I took care of her in recovery room at that night. When she recovered and she came conscious and she looked at me, really touching because she held me and told me that when I saw you the first time, I was so peaceful, so don't leave me. So I was so touching.
Walter Leung, a veteran nurse and recipient of the 50th Florence Nightingale Medal, shared his reasons for returning to the Gaza Strip next month, which will be his 4th time in the devastated region.
I think it's going back to my nursing training 40 plus years ago. Then when our tutors mostly were the Catholic nuns. And I think this is the seed already planted in my heart that we are caring patient, not as just a patient. Patient is a people. Respect and respecting the dignity of the victims is one of our primary concern. This is one of my passion that to keep my momentum.
Besides physical assistance, the Red Cross medical personnel said one of the most urgent needs of the Gaza community is mental and emotional care, adding that many of the patients have lost most, if not all, their families in Israeli airstrikes, and that they're in desperate need of assistance to deal with their trauma. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Palace Museum on Sunday has resumed on-site ticket sales for the treasures from the Egyptian Museum after it was temporarily suspended. Ticket sales, which were implemented on a first-come, first-served basis, have resumed since 3:30 p.m. this Sunday afternoon. Meanwhile, the museum has extended its opening hours to 8 p.m. to accommodate weekend visitors. Launched on Thursday, the Egyptian exhibition displays 250 treasures, including gold ornaments and mummy coffins. Visitors will have an opportunity to view them until August next year. That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.